They are finally here. It's been long overdue, but we now have a brand new set of snooker balls. And this is the most expensive set that money can buy. And the reason for that... Oh no.
So how did it all come to this? Well, to explain, we need to go back to a few days ago where I may have made a poor choice. Depending on how much they use, snooker balls usually last between 5 to 10 years, and mine certainly have had a lot of use. And after 8 years of wear and playing crazy shots like this, these definitely needed replacing. All I needed to do was go online and replace them. What could be so difficult about that?
But in the 8 or so years since I purchased this very set of snooker balls, things have changed.
Aramith, the company that makes snooker balls for the professional tour, had long since come up with an upgrade in an all too inviting case.
Aramith themselves describe them as more than just a pretty case and say they're drastically different and a higher standard to regular tournament champions. So I thought I'd get them and have a go.
Like the fool I was, I headed to eBay and managed to find a sweet deal. They arrived quickly, really well packaged, but I discovered I may have been misled or completely ripped off.
I actually purchased these balls for £215, but they retail on average about at £235, which is about 90 more than the standard set of balls that I had before.
But this video isn't about me being sold a counterfeit product. The question is, what is it that I've actually been sold?
So while these balls aren't actually fake, they are Aramith Tournament Champion Super Pro 1Gs, exactly what I paid for. The question is there any difference between a new set of them and a brand new set of ordinary Tournament Champions that, remember, cost £90 less? Is the only difference a posh case?
Aramith themselves say there is, and we're going to test that in a minute. But to add to the confusion, when they put the balls away at the Welsh Open, they were clearly using a standard box. So have I been taken for a ride? Well, I'd say definitely yes, because I've also bought a standard set of tournament champions so I can test the new balls like for like. While I'm finding out if there is in fact any difference, we first need to know what snooker balls actually are. Contrary to what a lot of people still believe, modern snooker balls aren't actually made of ivory. Billiard balls like these haven't been made in this way for nearly 100 years now, and most snooker balls have never been anywhere near an elephant. They're actually made from phenolic resin, which is a bit like a hard plastic. The manufacturing process then improved over time, allowing players to attempt shots they would never have thought of before. But snooker balls have always been a standard size of 52.5mm.
But there's no standard weight for a snooker ball. The only rule is every ball in a set must have the same mass to within a tolerance of 3 grams, meaning this ball, for example, will be within 3 grams of this ball and every other ball in the same set.
This is why they're referred to as 1G balls, because Aramith claim they're all identical to a tolerance of 1 gram.
But are the 1G balls more consistent like they claim they are? If only there was some way to find out. So I've got some scales to test if that's accurate.
This wasn't easy because the scales I had weren't really accurate enough and a bit rubbish, but I discovered eventually that every single ball in the case was 143 grams. But are they any different to regular tournament champions? I mean, what happens if they're all the same as well? About half of these balls were 143 grams, the other half were 142, and just 2 of them were 141 grams. So most of these balls would have had a 1 gram tolerance anyway, even though they weren't so consistent. But it's the rules of snooker that say the difference between the heaviest ball and the lightest ball should be no more than 3 grams. And Aramith are free to make their products above this standard, but so far we've only considered new ones. What happens when they become more worn out?
These are my old set of balls, and even though snooker balls are really solid, even these will lose some mass just from everyday use over time.
Most of them were 141 or 142 grams, but the cue balls seem to only be 140.
So my old cue ball is slightly lighter, but that should be unsurprising, because it would have had the most use over the last 8 years, and that just means it would have worn away more.
You're unlikely to notice the 2 or 3 grams, but the weight between different sets can vary more than this. Something you might notice if you're playing in a big snooker club and the balls have become mixed up.
With a lot of use, the cue ball can become fractionally smaller as well, and rather than replace an entire set of balls, sometimes people just opt to replace the cue ball.
But this isn't guaranteed to be the same weight as the original, and when you put all of these factors together, it can cause a problem.
What you often end up with is a cue ball that's a lot heavier or a lot lighter than the other balls you're playing with. So you get a lot more of a reaction, or in some cases, no reaction at all out of the cue ball.
If for no other reason, it's this that gives the 1G balls their main advantage, I think.
Even if these balls aren't any better than a regular set of tournament champions, it does give you the opportunity to take them to the club, something that you probably won't be able to do with a flimsy box. By purchasing these balls, you're paying for quality practice time wherever you are and wherever you're going. But is this worth £90 more? Probably not. They're going to have to be better than that. And we'll find out if they are after we find Haydar from Akureyri in Iceland, which is there. So what was going on with the Welsh Open? If these balls are supposed to be more consistent, and we've proved they are, why aren't World Snooker using them?
Well, as it turns out, I may have made an understandable error when I didn't see the 1G balls trademark case.
They just keep the balls in a regular box, and there's actually a number of reasons why they don't use a case like this.
Most of these involve sharp edges and transporting the balls in bulk, sometimes between countries, where just a cardboard box can make all of these problems easier to manage.
And they only use the balls for a few matches before selling them on to a club or an amateur player, so having a case for every set would just be a complete waste. But are these balls actually any better to play with?
To find out, I've been constantly alternating between sets for about the last week or so, playing a variety of shots just to see if there is any difference or if I'm able to get any more spin on the cue ball. I've also been trying as many standard tests as I could come up with. Although I didn't come up with a lot of these, it's one of these that we're going to start with.
Something we can easily test is how far they roll. Here I'm using the ordinary yellow and the black from the 1G set.
I also tried this with my old set that I had for the previous 8 years, and unsurprisingly all the little tiny dents in it meant that they didn't quite roll as far as both of these two. But I did test both new sets several times like this, and in the end came to a surprising conclusion that I wasn't expecting.
I tried this several times with different balls, and every single time I found they either went about the same distance, or if anything, the 1G balls didn't roll quite as far. And if this is the case, I think there is a genuine reason for this.
I believe this is to do with how much the cue ball seems to grip the cloth.
The main reason I wanted to make this video is when I played games using 1G balls, they haven't quite reacted the same. Especially when I was close like this, I quite often play a shot that didn't really run through as much as I wanted, and I thought something must be different.
I genuinely believe this is a small yet significant advantage of the 1Gs. Even more so than them all being the same, the spin you use on these balls seems to be a lot more significant.
I think these balls are at their most different when they're close together because you try to run them through and they just stun. With a normal set of balls, that would have just run through quite easily. I think what's happening is the 1G balls just grip the cloth a tiny bit more, which might explain why they roll a tiny fraction slower if that is the case. And it means on slower shots like this, if you want to play them with a lot of spin, they're a lot easier to play. And something else I've noticed is if you put any side spin on the cue ball, it seems to grip the cushions just a little bit more, although I know I have absolutely no way of proving this. But after all that, I wouldn't describe this set of balls as significantly better.
However, I would describe them as significantly different.
But let's just take a second to find Rob, who's in Rotherham in the United Kingdom, which is about there.
So are they actually worth buying, or are you better off with some standard tournament champions?
These balls do have a more consistent mass, just like they say they do, and they do react a little tiny bit better on the cloth. But if you haven't had 100 break, you might not even notice this. Either way, these balls do react differently. If you're using one set and switch to the other, it does take a little bit of getting used to. Which is a big reason, other than making this video, why I wanted both types. Because I usually know what's going to be used for my next match, so I can practice with the right set of balls, which I think is going to make quite a big difference.
I know this is a luxury that most people won't have, but I do kinda do this as my job now, and it also frees up my old set of balls to be used for potentially dangerous and damaging trick shots.
In conclusion then, I can't say if they're fully worth the extra cost. It does depend on the club you're playing in and how good a player you are.
They're going to be more of an advantage in a big club with low quality or mixed up balls. I genuinely think these balls are a small improvement, but that's probably lost on most players, who are unlikely to notice the difference.
On average, I'd say it's 70-30. 70% worth it and 30% rip-off to sell you a shiny case. But you might think differently to this, so let me know in the comments.
Because I genuinely think there's people who have benefited from these more than others. If you want to see more product reviews, I guess that's what this was, then have a look at these two videos. And remember, don't just watch play, and make the commitment to becoming a better player by subscribing to the channel and visit the website. See you later.